Welcome to In the Money. I'm your host, Daniel Dent. Over the last 20 years, I've worked with families and businesses, helping them become financially savvy. And now I'm going to do the same for you. Each show, I'm going to share personal financial topics to help you make better informed financial decisions. Today, we're talking about our national pastime, but I'm not talking about baseball, I'm talking about your income tax. Presidential elections are coming up, and income taxes are always part of that debate. Will Rogers famously said, "The only difference between death and taxes is that death doesn't get worse every time Congress meets." And I think he's right, but there are things we can do to prepare. Most of us only think about our taxes on April 15th, but in reality, there are things you should be doing throughout the year to lower the amount you owe and ensure they're being prepared properly. With so many different options, who should prepare your taxes, or should you do it yourself? If an accountant is the right option, how do you go about choosing the right one? We'll answer these questions, and we'll also be sharing tips to help you lower the amount you owe and keep you out of hot water. Joining us today is Mark McBryde, CPA and board member of the Memphis Chapter of the Tennessee Society of CPAs. It's time to talk taxes. Stay tuned.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
We're discussing income taxes today. Joining us is Mark McBryde, CPA and past president of the Memphis Chapter of the Tennessee Society of CPAs. Mark, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, before we get started, before we jump in, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a CPA and I've been practicing since 1985 when I graduated from college. And I have my own little practice in Germantown. It's a sole proprietorship. So just me by myself. I've got a couple people that work in my office. We do a lot of personal income taxes, work on business taxes, and monthly accounting for my clients.
Okay. You also, you're with the Memphis Chapter of the Tennessee Society of CPAs. Tell us a little bit about your role with that organization and what the organization is.
The CPAs have a support group, or our society, as we call it, is the Tennessee Society of CPAs, and that's for the whole state. And each section of the state has their own chapter, so there are various chapters around the state. Memphis has its own chapter because of the size, the number of CPAs that we have in Memphis, and served as a past president of that chapter, and now serve on the state board of the TSCPA, representing the Memphis chapter.
Yeah, that's great. I always think it's good to be involved in the industry organizations because you get a lot of education. Obviously, there's a lot of ethics requirements that go along with those organizations. So
Right.
Let's jump into this. There are tons of different ways to have your taxes done today. You can drive down the road and pick up TurboTax or some other software. Come tax time, there's always a guy spinning a sign outside promising fast refunds. And of course, there's CPAs. So who should be doing our taxes?
Well, I'm a little impartial here in that I think it should be a CPA. As CPAs, we have additional training, more than just a 6-week class to teach you how to do taxes. I've studied and earned the certificate, so my education is a little more. And then also, as a CPA, I'm required to maintain 40 hours of education each year in different subjects, because my practice primarily is in tax. I do a lot of CPE and updates on the current tax code since it's constantly changing. Mm-hmm. I feel like you've got a little more integrity with the CPA, and I'm here year-round. I don't close up after April 15th and disappear until the next January. I'm here year-round to help my clients. There are things that will pop up during the year, always the dreaded notice from the IRS or something like that, so I'm available year-round to help them.
Yeah, there are a lot of other factors that go into it too. I think if everybody could have a CPA, that would be great, but certainly the time commitment that if you do it yourself,
Right.
that you have to commit to it and to do it properly. The knowledge level, like you mentioned, it's something that most people only deal with once a year. As far as income levels or net worths or any other factor financially like that, does that, I guess, qualify someone more so to use a CPA than others?
Not necessarily. I'm a service. I'm providing a service, and you can get that service anywhere or do it yourself. So I'm a convenience and I'm a service. So the question that I have is, how do I distinguish myself? And I think I do that by my integrity and my education, just continuing to study the tax code and having resources available to help me. So I understand that, you know, somebody with just a W-2 and nothing else, they really should be able to do the tax return on their own. And I think that you know, some people just don't want to. They don't want to take the time to learn how to do it. And so that's where I come in for those people. My clients are all across the spectrum as far as earnings and how complex their return is. I have some very easy returns and I have some really difficult returns. So I don't think there's a one determining factor for saying I need a CPA. Some people hire me because they just don't want to deal with it. They can run by my office, they drop off their information. A week or two later, they got a tax return done. So
one of the big factors, I guess, in choosing a tax preparer is going to be cost. I think in the Memphis area, average tax return preparation across all different types is $180 to $200. So any advice around cost and how you weigh that against who should do your taxes?
I think that the person that you choose to do your tax return is really a personal choice, and it comes down to your belief and in them. So I start off at $300 for a tax return. That's my minimum. And there are going to be some places that are more, some places that are less. It just depends on their circumstances as to how they set up their fees. But it really comes down to your trust in the person that's doing the work. It's a relationship. So.
Okay. One other thing too, I know this year, and I believe they may have done this last year as well, the United Way of the Mid-South and the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance opened several sites in the Mid-South to help families complete their tax return,
Yes.
geared more towards lower and moderate income.
Right.
And I believe the people who were doing those taxes or went through some training by the IRS, so there's a good opportunity out there for our lower income citizens.
Right. They set up in the community centers or the main library downtown or midtown. They'll have a section set up there to have people come in and they can help them with their taxes.
That's a great opportunity to get their taxes professionally done and
Correct.
put more money in their pocket. So versus going to someone that may be less reputable. So I think that's a great service that's out there. We have to take a short break, and we'll be right back with Mark McBryde.
Looks like it's done.
Don't let salmonella get funky with your chicken. On average, 1 in 6 Americans will get a foodborne illness this year. You can't see these microbes, but they might be there. So learn the right temperature to cook each type of meat. Keep your family safe at foodsafety.gov.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back to In the Money. If you're just joining us, we're talking about income taxes. Today we're joined by Mark McBryde, local CPA, and also former president of the Memphis Chapter of the Tennessee Society of CPAs. Mark, before the break, we were talking a bit about all the different options that are available for people to have their taxes prepared. And I think most people are aware that CPAs are the highest level of experts that know the tax code and provide a lot of protection there when they're preparing your taxes. So, what other things do CPAs bring to the table?
Ethics, integrity, education. I think those combination of those items helps us to stand out from the crowd of just being a tax preparer. Anybody can prepare a tax return, but with the CPA behind my name, I feel a little more pressure to maintain, to keep up on current subjects and also being there year-round for the clients.
Yeah, I think that's important, the year-round that you've mentioned a few times now, whereas someone else that may do it or a friend of the family, they don't have the expertise, they don't have the licensing or the education, they don't keep up with all the changes that happen over the year. I know there's consequences if you intentionally file your taxes wrong. What do some of those consequences look like?
But it could just be a slap on the wrist and pay some penalties from the IRS. Sometimes you may lose a 1099 or a W-2. Forget about a W-2. And I had a client who had worked for a business and left in December, but she still got a paycheck in the next January. So at the end of the next year, she was going to have a W-2 from that business, and she forgot. And about a year later, we got a letter from the IRS saying, "Hey, this W-2 wasn't reported on the return," so we had to do some calculations, make sure their calculations were correct, and just wrote a letter back and said, "You're right, we forgot about that one, and here's what we think we owe." And but our people will get an amended 1099 from the investment company. We've had that happen a lot where we've already filed the tax return, they come back and make a change on the 1099, and so we have to go back and amend the return to correct that. And there's an opportunity to correct it before the IRS even catches it if you find out. So.
Okay, yeah, that's great to know, because I know a lot of times that can unintentionally happen. And
right.
There's anything from fines to extra interest to you can go full out Wesley Snipes and go to jail, I guess, if you do the completely wrong thing. So there's a lot of CPAs that are practicing in the Mid-South. How do we go about finding the right person for us?
There's several resources that you can use to find a CPA. You can contact the Tennessee Society of CPAs. Then they have a resource there. Obviously you can use the Yellow Pages, or the Better Business Bureau has a listing of CPAs that are members of the Better Business Bureau. Your Chamber of Commerce can help you, and references from friends. Ask friends, for who do they use. And it never hurts to interview several. You might not click with one person where the next person may fit just fine. So, it's an interview process. Just talk to several different people until you find the one that you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, I think that's a great recommendation. What should we be asking CPAs as we go out and interview different ones?
Their experience. I think ask them how long they've been doing this, and some CPAs have reached a limit where they're no longer accepting any more clients. They'll tell you on the front end, we're just not taking any new clients right now. They will. I think you should ask them. What are your fees like? I can give you a range of fees, but I can't really tell you what your fee is going to be until I've looked at the return. And so when I first meet with the client, I don't charge them for the first meeting. so they can come in, we can sit down and talk about what their needs are, what they're looking for as far as a CPA. Do they have something really odd in their tax return that I may not know how to handle? If I don't, I can either go out and get the education to learn to handle it, or I can recommend another CPA who would be more familiar with that. I don't charge to come in and meet and sit down and talk, because it might not work out, so the only thing we've wasted at that point is just our time, and now we've got a reference to go on to the next person.
Mm-hmm. You bring up a great point with if you have an existing CPA and maybe you have some very unusual situation and they've not dealt with it in the past. How do you go about having that conversation and deciding whether you should stick with your existing CPA or try to find somebody that has experience in that particular situation that you found yourself in?
Well, if you've got an existing CPA, then obviously you need to sit down and talk with them about it and explain the situation. And then as for me, I've got resources all across the state. I know CPAs in different cities and different experiences, and I'm able to pick up the phone, call them, ask them questions. I've got classes that I can order pretty much on demand. I can go out on the internet and find a class and set it up and take the class right then to gain some experience that way. And then also, there's some situations where I just, it's above my pay grade, so I'll recommend a CPA that I know will take care of them.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned you're a sole proprietor. What's the biggest difference as we go out and we're looking for a CPA, whether it's a sole proprietor or a larger firm? What are the differences there that we need to look for? Or are there any differences really?
Well, there are differences. In my office, I'm the one that's going to take your phone call, sit down and talk to you. But I also have staff there to help me, to support me. A larger firm, you're going to have more partners. There's more diverse experience in a larger firm, and they've got more staff and more training than, say, just a small office, because you've got more experiences across the board. So I think it's just experience and a broader experience for a larger firm.
Okay. We have to take another quick break. We'll be up next talking about some 2015 tax tips and changes to the tax code. We'll be back with Mark. Stay with us. You don't want to miss it.
They'll test you. Try to break your will. But however loud the loudness gets, however many cheese puffs may fly, you're the driver, the one in control. Stand firm. Just wait. And move only when you hear the click that says they're buckled in for the drive. Never give up till they buckle up.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back to In the Money. CPA Mark McBryde is with us. Mark, I wanted to touch on one thing before we get into tax tips for 2015 and some of the changes. Let's talk about audits. That's a pretty scary word for most people.
Yes.
I think one of my old clients said it the best when he said it's like having a root canal and a colonoscopy all at the same time. So, can you tell us about what are some of the red flags that would cause you to get audited?
There are a lot of red flags that could be out there. The IRS runs a statistics and has a set of norms that they consider for tax returns. So if your income falls within a certain level, they expect to see your deductions fall within the same level. And I have clients who may have a low income, but they are big on giving, so they donate a lot of money to different charities. And so in their case, they're going to be outside the norm, and may cause the IRS to come back and ask for documentation to support that deduction. Missing a 1099 or a W-2 like we talked about previously, that will cause the IRS to generate a letter. And most of the time we can keep it from going past the letter stage. Occasionally the IRS will want to come in and do a full-blown audit and look through every detail that is connected with that tax return. So the more complex your tax return is, the more susceptibility there may be for an audit, because there are a lot of items on there that fall outside of the norms.
Mm-hmm. So another good reason to have a CPA, you have somebody that knows what those norms are and can answer that letter when it does come.
I certainly think so.
Let's talk about 2015. I'm certainly open to paying my fair share, and I want to do that, but I don't really want to pay a penny more. What are some of the changes that are happening in 2015 people need to be aware of?
The income brackets will change for 2015 from 2014, and there are basically 4 sets of brackets. There's the married filing jointly, married filing separately, head of household, and single. And each bracket is broken down to you pay incrementally on your taxes. So on, say, the first $16,000, you would pay 10%. And then between 16 and 32, you may pay 15%. So it graduates up until it gets to 39.6% for the top tax bracket. Those brackets are adjusted each year depending on Congress's desires. They can move up or they can move down. This year it looks like they have moved a little wider, so there's more income in each bracket.
Mm-hmm. So would that generally mean people pay more in taxes total or less in taxes?
Well, if your income was exactly the same as last year, taxes may go down a few dollars from the previous year, so a little bit less.
Okay, well that's a shocker. That never happens, it seems like. Also, Affordable Care Act or Obamacare is out there. If you don't have insurance, what does that mean for us?
If you do not have insurance, then there's a potential for an additional tax to be assessed based on your income level. If you do not have insurance, then there will be a tax on that. But there are certain instances where you may be exempt from that tax.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the other normal ways, things that haven't changed but people should really be doing or thinking about throughout the year to keep their taxes down?
Well, if you work for a company, for instance, that has a retirement plan and they make a contribution, they match your contribution to that retirement plan, that's always a good source to get a benefit and have tax-free or non-taxed income go into that. You still pay Social Security and Medicare on that money, but you do not pay federal income tax until such time that you pull that money out of the retirement plan. Mm-hmm. So if the company matches, it's always a good idea to start with at least their match, and that way you get some free money to go into your retirement plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I 100% agree. If a company is going to match you 3% for whatever you put in, and you don't do it, you're just giving away the money or letting the company keep it. And in essence, just saying no thanks to my employer. I don't want a bonus this year, so it's very important to take advantage of that. And it also sounds like too, as you donate money to your retirement plan, if you're making $30,000 and you donate $2,000, well, there's $2,000 that you're not paying taxes on up front, at least till you pull it out in retirement.
Correct.
And generally we think that we'll be in a lower tax bracket in retirement.
My dad had an idea that he passed on to me, and I've used it since. And he said that start out with a small amount in what you contribute, and then each time you get a raise, bump that figure up a little bit until you reach the maximum. Because once you've started, then every time you bump it up with a raise, you won't feel it, and you'll be contributing more towards your retirement to build a larger retirement down the road.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. Yeah. Great advice. Let's talk about charitable contributions also, because that's another great way to help lower your taxes. Mm-hmm. What do the limits look like? What are some of the advantages there?
If you were to contribute a large amount of money and it exceeded 50% of your income, then some of that donation would be suspended or carried over to the next year. Most people will stick around the 10% level, and there also, you've got the contributions for what we call non-cash contributions, your Goodwill or Salvation Army or veterans, where you give them clothes or furniture from your house. It's also a contribution that you can deduct on your tax return.
And how do you value out those contributions, say to a Goodwill or to a veterans organization?
The IRS says that we can use the thrift shop value of the donation, and there's several sites online that if you can just Google it, you can go out there and get a sheet that will give you an approximate value, a range of what something like a washing machine is worth, or a bed, or a couple pairs of khakis and a dress shirt.
Mm-hmm. One other thing I wanted to touch on too are the tax scams that are out there. Can you talk about that? Because that's something we see in banking quite a bit now.
Yes. I have several clients who have called me, and they've had somebody call them on the phone purporting to be an IRS agent, threatening them with all sorts of legal action if they don't do something. The IRS will never call you on the phone. They will always contact you by a letter. And if it's really bad, it's going to be a signed receipt letter. But they will always be contacting you by letter. There are a few instances where the IRS may call you, but it is after you have already talked to somebody on the phone or by letter and arranged for a phone call. So if somebody calls you and says, I'm Joe Smith with the IRS, and you have not paid your taxes, you can either hang up with them immediately or don't respond to them is the best advice.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we've seen, customers, these callers are very good and they're very convincing, and they try to bully you into giving them information.
They're very aggressive, and it's unfortunate because they're taking advantage of people who can't afford to be taken advantage of. And because they don't have a CPA or a trusted advisor that they can call, whether it's your bank officer or an attorney or a CPA, to call up and say, hey, I got this phone call, but I know I've paid my taxes, so what's going on? Why am I in trouble?
Yeah, great advice. Mark, thanks for coming in. I hope you come back. We appreciate all the advice today. Today we've discussed the various ways to prepare your taxes. Determining whether to have a professional or doing yourself largely depends on your ability, complexity of your situation, and of course cost, if you have the time to commit to doing it properly also. There are a number of consequences to filing your taxes inappropriately, and if possible, I always recommend finding a CPA, someone who prepares taxes for a living and that will do it right. With elections looming, taxes are always a hot topic, so today I'll leave you with a quote from a great leader, Winston Churchill. I contend that for a nation to try and tax itself into prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket and trying to lift himself up by the handle. If you don't know what that means, just give it a try. That's all the time we have today. Thanks to Mark McBryde, and thank you for watching. If you'd like to see more shows, follow us on YouTube or Facebook at Germantown Municipal Television. You can also visit our website at www.gmtvonline.org. And remember, each person's financial situation is unique. Before making any decisions, speak to a financial professional to see if our discussions today are in your best interest. We'll see you next month. I'm Daniel Dent, and now you are in the money.